From the News Channel 5 Network, this is SportsLine.
Hey there, SportsLine on your television. Steve Layman here with you. Glad you are here with us tonight on News Channel 5. Plus, phone lines are open, 737-7767. And as always, we invite you to be a part of the program with us here tonight with your participation. Lots of things we can get into tonight. Let's start with some news from the Titans on a day off today. And this is not going to help the depth on the offensive line. The Titans placed backup tackle Ty Sambrailo on the reserve retired list today. Likely means his career is completely over. He remains on that list, so if he decides to come back, the Titans retain his rights. But for now, it looks like Sambrailo is just done and out of the mix when it comes to the Titans' offensive line situation. They also placed punter Brett Kern on the COVID-19 reserve list. He was already on the injured list. Hadn't played for the last couple of weeks. Johnny Townsend has come in to punt instead. But now the Pro Bowl punter of the Titans on the COVID list, which barring something interesting. Now, I know for a fact that Kern is vaccinated, so he could potentially test out in time to play Sunday. But between the injury and now this, it seems unlikely that he would play for Monday Night Football against the Bills. So that's kind of the bad news from the day. The other news coming from the Titans is Avery Williamson appears to be coming back to town. Multiple reports out there have the Titans signing the linebacker that they originally drafted back in 2014. He will come back. He played here for 4 seasons, actually made 59 consecutive starts before going off and signing a big contract with the Jets. Played there for a couple years, was in Pittsburgh at the end of last season, then cut in training camp. Was out in Denver on the practice squad just for a week, and now he's coming back here to Tennessee to be a part of the active roster. Jayon Brown, of course, on injured reserve, so he's a guy that might fit into that lineup along with Rashaan Evans and David Long. When you look at the Titans and the productivity, and Williamson has 607 career tackles, and the Titans really struggled to tackle in Jacksonville on Sunday, so perhaps a good fit to bring a guy back who knows a fair amount about how the Titans like to play and what they want to do on the defensive side of the ball. We can talk more about those moves. We can talk more about the Titans. We talked a lot last night about the protection issues around Ryan Tannehill. We talked some about the greatness of Derrick Henry, and we talked about this defense and where they stand right now in trying to propel this team forward. The offense has not lived up to the hype at this point of the season. The defense has been improved, but from the very bottom of the league last year, and there's still definitely some warts on that side of the ball. They've got to be better, because the schedule gets much more difficult starting with the Bills on Monday night at Nissan Stadium. College football, what a weekend it was. So many great games around the country. I don't know if there's ever been an 11 a.m. viewing hour or viewing window as good as what we saw on Saturday. You had the Red River rivalry, which somehow topped last year's 4 overtime game. Oklahoma coming all the way back with a backup quarterback, Caleb Williams, in the game. They come all the way back. They take the lead. Texas reties it, and then Oklahoma essentially walks off on the second to last play of the game on a 30-some yard touchdown run to get bragging rights back in the Red River rivalry. And almost simultaneous to that, you had the game going down at Oxford between Ole Miss and Arkansas. 2 teams that are trying to bounce back from tough losses the weekend before, but are very good football teams. And you had Ole Miss take the lead with 1:08 left. Matt Corral to Braylon Sanders, 68-yard touchdown pass. And then K.J. Jefferson leads Arkansas right back down the field, gets them in the end zone on the final play of regulation. Lane Kiffin thought time had expired before on the previous play, but no, one more chance for Arkansas. They scored, so what's Sam Pittman do? He says, we're going to win it right here, baby. Let's go for 2. I love the call. I love the idea of not going into overtime, especially on the road. I just didn't love the play call. It never really had a chance to work, and Ole Miss held on 52-51 in a shootout. Then in the afternoon, you had number 3 Iowa against Penn State, which was ranked 4th last week. Iowa able to hold on at home 23-20. And then, of course, the game Saturday night. Number 1, Alabama, 19-game winning streak goes down at Texas A&M, a team that frankly had not lived up to expectations so far this season, but in front of an incredible environment there at Kyle Field, rose to the occasion. Matt Calzada came up big, and the Aggies get that last-second field goal and celebrate there with basically 100,000 fans. A huge, huge upset that changes the landscape of this season. Now, I still think Alabama's one of the top teams of the country and probably looks like a playoff team right now, but here's the deal. If they go to the SEC title game and lose to Georgia and have 2 losses, that really opens up the door for other teams. You've got Oklahoma sitting there unbeaten right now. You've got Iowa sitting there unbeaten. There's other teams in the Big Ten, Michigan, Michigan State. Obviously, Penn State's going to have a chance in that division to get itself back in the mix. Ohio State can certainly get itself back in the mix from the loss early on. So there's definitely a possibility that Alabama could get left out now if it is unable to run the table from this point. So it changed the landscape of what you're thinking. It changed the landscape of what you thought the college football playoff might look like this year. But overall, it was just an absolutely incredible Saturday of college football. We look forward to more fun this weekend. It's going to be a lot of fun on Rocky Top. Tennessee's won back-to-back games. Excitement is high about Josh Heupel and what this offense is doing. They've scored on every possession in the first half the last 2 weeks. Every single possession against Missouri and against South Carolina. These were impressive, impressive wins by Tennessee. And now they get a primetime game against Ole Miss. Number 13 team in the country, and maybe more important to Vol fans, the return of Lane Kiffin as a head coach. Yes, he's been back a couple of times before with Alabama, calling plays as an offensive coordinator, but Alabama's Nick Saban's team. And Alabama at those times was a heavy favorite and won big against Tennessee. This is Lane Kiffin's team at Ole Miss. And this is the next progression in his career after he left Tennessee 12 years ago. Basically in the middle of the night. And Tennessee fans have not forgotten that. That is certainly not the impression I get. If you disagree with me, if you're a Tennessee fan and you've completely moved on from that and no longer blame Kiffin for what has followed with Derek Dooley and Butch Jones and Jeremy Pruitt over the last 12 years before you get to Josh Heupel, all right, call us up, 737-7767. Let us know that that's what you think. Also, maybe Josh Heupel has changed your mind somewhat on this. Yes, it's been a mess for the last 12 years. But have you seen enough from Heupel through the first 6 games or maybe the last couple of weeks that make you think Tennessee is finally poised to turn the corner under one of these head coaches? There have been moments before with some of the other ones. But do you see something different from Josh Heupel? Interested in your thoughts on that. 737-7767. But I expect this to be a hornet's nest on Saturday night. I mean, number one, Tennessee's excited about its football program for the first time in at least a couple of years. I think the expectations were very much tempered at the start of this season. Last season was a mess, partly because of COVID, but obviously the team did not perform well for Jeremy Pruitt. So you've got to go back to the end of the 19 season when Tennessee ran off 7-8 games in a row to get to the point where Tennessee fans were this excited about the way Tennessee was playing. So there's the excitement about where they're at. You're going to have a big crowd for that. And then you add in, okay, it's a big game. You've got a top 15 team coming to town. Talk about an opportunity to boost your program. If you can win that type of a game on a Saturday night in a packed Neyland Stadium with recruits watching, people around the country paying attention, and then you throw in Lane Kiffin. And again, I mean, you remember it, they painted the rock. There were signs everywhere about "We hate Lane Kiffin." That was 12 years ago. He had been there for one season. It was a pretty decent season. And then just like that, he was gone and off to USC. And I think if you ask Lane Kiffin today, if you gave him true serum, and he wasn't just giving you the coach speak about what's next and what's in front of him, which you have to do as a head coach, but if you could really get him in an honest moment, I think Lane Kiffin would tell you that that was a mistake. At the time, USC was his dream job. He'd worked there before, kind of in the glory days under Pete Carroll. He thought USC was the best program in the country. It was the program that he aspired to coach. And when he got that opportunity at that age, he just couldn't say no. It was nothing against Tennessee. It just came to him. He was a rising star that everybody believed in. He'd just come from the NFL. He did a good job in year one at Tennessee. And he got the keys to the castle in LA with USC. And Tennessee fans certainly didn't understand it at the time, but that was the truth. That is what Lane Kiffin felt when it came to that job and the opportunity he had at that point in the career. And here's the other thing about USC is, given the success he had seen previously when Pete Carroll was there, I think part of him thought, if I don't take this job now, I may never get it, because the next guy who goes into USC could have a ton of success. Now, that hasn't played out to be true at all, but that might have been part of the thought process at the time for Lane Kiffin. And so he goes off to take the USC job, and it really spurned Tennessee fans because they lost a coach that they were excited about, that they went out and got, that they paid the money for in one season, just like that. And I think in terms of the expectation and the belief of where Tennessee football was, it also took a hit there. Because just over a decade earlier, the Vols won the national championship. And they were in multiple SEC championship games after that. They were a cream-of-the-crop program in the SEC East. Well, over those last couple of years with Philip Fulmer, Georgia rose with Mark Richt, Urban Meyer had taken Florida to a new level, and they were poised to win. And actually, with Lane Kiffin, won a second national championship right before he walked onto campus in Knoxville, and then Alabama won the next year. The balance of power in the SEC changed during that time. That is when the run began, where you had Florida, LSU, Florida, Alabama, Auburn, Alabama, Alabama. That's when the balance of power shifted in the SEC. And it happened as Tennessee struggled a bit at the end under Phil Fulmer, and Lane Kiffin came in. And then when Lane Kiffin left after one season, I think it changed some of the perception about Tennessee football, maybe internally, but definitely around the nation. It wasn't winning at the same standard. All these other programs in the SEC had been elevated, and now a coach, a highly thought of coach, leaves for another premier job. Wanted that job over being on Rocky Top. And again, I think for Lane Kiffin, he inherited a mess out in LA. That was a program that was under sanctions. He didn't have full scholarships. He was actually way down on scholarships, and it's hard to compete. I don't care who you are and what type of recruits you get. When you lose that type of depth, you're not the same program. You just aren't. And he had to battle through that, and he was fired in the middle of his fourth season. And he had to work his way back as an assistant coach, and then going down to Florida Atlantic, and finally getting to Oxford and Ole Miss last year. He's paid his dues to get back to this point. Would it have been different had he stayed at Tennessee? I don't know. But it definitely changed his career trajectory by leaving that night back in 2009. And there's no question it had an impact on Tennessee. The perception nationally, and then what followed. What Tennessee was able to hire. They go from Lane Kiffin to Derek Dooley. And that did not turn out well. The Butch Jones tenure ended poorly. And then after the mess of a search to get the next coach, they settle on Jeremy Pruitt, and that blows up after a few seasons. So here you are with Josh Heupel as the 4th coach on Rocky Top since Lane Kiffin left. And now he leads Tennessee against Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss on Saturday night. By the way, it was announced today they are checkering Neyland for that game. One of the coolest visuals you will see in college football. 102,000 strong with the orange and white alternating between the sections. And you've got to imagine it is just going to be electric on Saturday night for that return. We can talk more about this game. What do you think about this Tennessee team? How excited, how pumped up are you about Josh Heupel in the direction of the program? How excited are you to see Lane Kiffin back and have the Vols with a chance to maybe spoil his return to Rocky Top? We can get to that. We can get to the Titans. We can get to much more. I got some thoughts on the John Gruden situation in Vegas as well. Stay tuned. You're watching SportsLine here on News Channel 5+.